Before we get to calls, though, I just wanted to share a quick email from one of our listeners that I just thought was really great. She was listening to the show Curriculum of Your Life, and there was a woman talking about her chronic health problems. And your question was, what if we didn't have the ability to think the thought, I am sick, how would we then feel? And this question made her think about her son. He was born very premature 25 years ago, and he has some physical and mental challenges. Although he has limited ability to communicate verbally, he can get his basic wants and needs across. And she says she's always marveled at the fact that when he would have anything from the flu to surgeries, he would just happily rest and sleep until he felt better and always recovered quicker than a typical person would. And there was never a complaint. Doctors are not yet sure, she says, what is specifically wrong with him, but he always responds to just rest, and he enjoys music, and that's kind of how he heals himself, and never has the thought, I am sick. He never acknowledges it or really accepts it. He just kind of goes along and then seems to kind of bring himself back into good health. And she says, I realized Dr. Dyer helped me with that one question. To see the way my son handles himself is a beautiful example of the gracefulness of a pure soul. Instead of the sad feeling that he doesn't understand what's going on, he absolutely does understand, and so does Dr. Dyer. So she just wanted to say thank you for your contributions to Hay House and for having her think the thought that he is well. So I just thought that was sweet.
That's a wonderful letter, and the concept is really. It's basically the concept behind a book I did a couple years ago called "Excuses Be Gone."
Yes.
Which is what I have a paradigm in there, and one of the questions in the paradigm is, what if you couldn't think the thoughts that you have that tell you that you can't do this, or this is impossible, or that you have to be poor, or that you can't get that job, or that you're infirm, or that you're weak, or that you're sick, and so on. What if you just couldn't think that thought? And it's interesting. I've talked before about this, the cleanse that I was on, and I just did another 3 days with my daughter Summer, who's here.
Yes, the Master Cleanse.
Yeah, the Master Cleanse. I just went back on it for 3 days just to sort of support her with it. She had taken up smoking at one time, and she's getting rid of all of that and really getting herself very, very healthy. And I was noticing wherever I go for a walk or anything, I see people walking by a restaurant, and they take a great big cheeseburger with bacon on it or something. They go to take a bite of it, and this isn't something that I've put in my body probably in 20 years. But when you're going through a cleansing process, the whole process becomes mental. And what it makes me realize is that virtually everything in our life is mental. What kinds of thoughts do we think? And I'm watching people put this great big greasy thing into their mouth and taking a bite of it and drinking a great big soda, and, they're 50, 60, 70 pounds overweight and so on. And I'm thinking, oh man, that looks so good. And I'm thinking, what a kind of a mental thing is that? And I begin to realize that it's like we become what we think about. And, most of the difficulties that we have, I think about people out there who are overweight. And I think, what if you couldn't look in a mirror? And what if you couldn't step on a scale? And what if you couldn't think the thought? That I'm overweight, that I'm fat, that I'm unattractive, that I'm lazy, that whatever it is, all the things that are associated with that. And so I think what she was saying there is very, very relevant, is like, begin to look at and say to yourself, well, what if I couldn't think these thoughts, that I can't make things happen, that I can't manifest things? And the only thought that you could think of, with God, all things are possible, and I am connected to God, I am a piece of God. What if that was the only thing that you could think? And then begin to challenge yourself and just say, okay, then I'm going to not give myself permission or the right to think thoughts that don't work for me. Like she was talking about her son. It's like, what if he just absolutely could only think, I am well, I am content, I am happy. And that's why, so many people, when they go to the hospitals, they go to doctors and so on, and they have all of these tests that are run, and then they look at all of the numbers, and they look at all of the things, and they start to think about all of the things that are going to go wrong with their body. And I tell them, what if you couldn't think those thoughts? What if you could only think that I'm healthy, I am content, I am peaceful, I am strong, I am God, I am connected to God, all things are possible. And if you had been conditioned to only think that way from the time that you were just a child, your whole physical world would change.
Right.
And that really leads me into a little bit about what all of the controversy and all of the discussion about the Supreme Court decision of the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, John Roberts, siding with, quote, the liberal wing of the Supreme Court and upholding the individual mandate and the healthcare law that there's been so much fighting over and so on. And I think about, What is it? What is all of this controversy about? What is everybody all upset about? What is it that government's going to come in and do this and do that? I'm 72 years old, so I've been on a program that is called Medicare for 7 years now. And I go to whatever doctor I want to go to, if I want to go. Nobody comes in and tells me anything that I can do or that I can't do. It's a very simple system, and it's something that we put into place that every civilized country in the world has for every single one of their citizens. Well, we finally have it just for people, over the age of 65 or so on, and also for people who are, incapacitated, and it's never been a problem, and everybody supports it, and all of the people in the Republican Party who are opposed to this health care, certainly don't want to get rid of Medicare and so on. And then I think about all of the people up there arguing that we're going to repeal this and we're going to repeal. Here's the Speaker of the House, John Boehner, is up there saying we have to throw this whole law out and it's socialized medicine. And meantime, he has voted for himself a wonderful package of government subsidized and taken care of health care for himself, and every single person in that Congress has a form of what they call, quote, socialized medicine, which somehow there's something terribly wrong with that word. And all of these people who are voting on whether or not the rest of the country can just be free from the worry. The thing that concerns me the most about this, Diane, is the element of cruelty that is inherent in this argument that we have to, let's toss this all out and let's all start over again, which really means let's get rid of it, let's never have it again, and let's just say, we got a wonderful healthcare system in this country, except for the 50 or 60 million people who don't have health care, who, when they find out that they have a brain tumor, or when they have an accident, or when they get some kind of serious debilitating disease where they need continuous coverage, they don't have insurance, they can't get insurance, the hospitals won't take them, and they just basically die and live in this system where they're just so worried and so filled with fear. It just seems to me like an absence of compassion. And I was so impressed with the Supreme Court Justice, with Justice Roberts coming along and saying this is a signature thing that has happened in this, under President Obama. I think it has the same kind of magnitude as when the Social Security became something, and when the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act, the Medicare Act, all of these things that are just something that is accepted as, if you're born in the United States of America, one of the greatest countries in the world, supposedly, you should at least be able to live, every citizen ought to be able to live free from the worry that that they can't get the kind of medical attention that they want. And this is the direction that we're moving. And I was watching on Bill Maher show on Friday night, there was a woman on there who was saying, this is only really the very beginning, that we are in an untenable situation. We're in a place where healthcare costs are just going through the roof. They were using the example of somebody on the panel had gone into a hospital, and they got their bill, and they got a bill for, those little packets of Kleenex that they give you when you're in the hospital? Right, like $20 a piece for that. $28. $28 they were billed for a little packet of Kleenex. And Bill Maher was saying, where does this go? You can go over to any drugstore and get that for 49 cents. Where does the $27.50 go? It's the whole thing is just so out of control that bringing it back and having the same thing that we're offering for all of our citizens in this country, which is health care for everybody over the age of 65, why not offer it for everybody? Why not just figure out a way, whatever it takes to make this happen, let's just get together and do it. And when the congressmen get together and say, we can't do this, when the Republicans particularly say, we're going to throw this thing all out, then if you're so opposed to socialized medicine, then stop taking it yourself. You voted for it for yourself. You gave yourself the best medical care that anyone could ever have, and you voted for it for life, for you, for your family. Even if you just serve 2 years in Congress, you get lifetime medical insurance and everything taken care of, paid for in this, quote, socialized means, by the government. So,
right,
anyway.
Why shouldn't the rest of us be offered the same ability to do that? And I've been without insurance before in various jobs and had to try to pray nothing happened. And it really is it's a horrible feeling, when you have to go to the drugstore and you have to pay the full price for your prescriptions. You can't get any break. And,
or something happens to you, like my friend Terry Gordon, who's got a book coming out with Hay House this is July now, this month, called No Storm Lasts Forever. He's a cardiologist, a brilliant man, a very good friend of mine. It's a wonderful book. I really recommend it. When the book comes out, I want to put Terry on the show. But his son was, just got into a terrible automobile accident and was rendered a quadriplegic, and he's going to need medical care for the rest of his life. What do we do with people like this? Do we just say, we'll just let them die, or just, we're not going to give them the care that they need? The ability to offer insurance and a worry-free life when it comes to medical expenses and so on is something that ought to just come with being a citizen of the country, whatever it takes to make it all happen. And I just think that they've done such a masterful job of convincing a whole lot of people that there's something terrible going on here and that the government's going to come in and that there's going to be death panels and all of this stuff like the Sarah Palins and so on. All of that, we ought to just dismiss all of that and say, look, let's offer complete medical care to everyone in our country and get these medical costs down. The people in Washington are the ones who are going to have to make this happen. And if they say we don't know how to do it, we can't afford it, we say, well, then you managed to figure out a way to do it for yourselves. Now go into another room and don't come out until you figure out a way to manage it for everyone else. By the way, for the people who are paying for your insurance.
Exactly. They need to send you up there. Dr. Dyer goes to Washington.
If I went to Washington, I would just say to all of them, all right, this is the room. You're all going in there, and you figured out whatever it is that you did in there to figure out how to give yourselves complete medical care for life and your families. You don't come out of that room until you figured out how to make this happen for everybody else, particularly because those are the people who are paying the bills for the health insurance that you've given yourself.
Exactly. Exactly. I agree. Very interesting. Anyway. It was definitely the topic all weekend. I was at a party. Everybody was talking about it. So people are very passionately discussing this whole thing. Brings up a lot of feelings in a lot of people. There's so much mythology around all of this. There's so many rumors about it and all of that. And basically it just gets down to a political gambit. That's what it really is. One party doesn't want the other party to be in power, so they're doing everything that they can. And nobody could, people, as I say, I've heard it said over and over again that the main focus of the Republican Party now in Washington is to make sure that the president does not get reelected. That ought not to be the main focus of the people who have been elected to Congress. The main focus ought to be how can we govern and provide the services for our people, not how can we just stop somebody from becoming president. It's very frustrating. They just cited the U.S. Attorney General Holder for contempt of Congress over this gun thing down in Mexico. And I said, I think the whole country's in contempt of Congress. I'm certainly one of them that is. That's my rant for today. That's Dr. Dyer's soapbox.
Right.
Very good. Well, we've got some time to grab calls here. And
sure.
Did you want to start in Toronto, where you just were?
I was just there. Let's see who's there.
Let's go there. Catherine on line 1, and we will start with her. And Catherine, welcome to the show. You're on with Dr. Dyer.
Hello, Diane. Hello,
Hi.
Dr. Dyer. How are you?
Hi, Catherine.
Speaking to you today is a wish fulfilled, so thank you. I really appreciate it.
Were you in the audience? Last week?
I was. I found it very humorous and very moving, so thank you for that.
Oh, good. You got a few laughs?
Yes.
You saw my brother up there. What'd you think of that?
I got a chance to shake his hand. And
did you?
I just wanted to tell him how perfect and enough it was in terms of what he spoke, because he almost started to go to an apologetic place. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted him to know that it was very moving.
Yeah, let me just say 1 minute here before we get into Catherine, your call, was that my brother David has just written a book called From Darkness to Light. And he tells the story. I mean, he was an alcoholic for over 50 years. He was very, very reserved and shy. He won the Bronze Star for bravery in Vietnam and 2 tours of duty there. He was basically an atheist and a very withdrawn person. And he got Parkinson's disease when he was 68 years old. That was like 4 years ago. And everything in his life changed. The Parkinson's disease, which you would think of as this is supposedly a diagnosis of an incurable disease, and it's just going to get progressively worse and so on. And it turned everything around in his life. He found God. He stopped drinking. He stopped smoking. He started writing. He's now written a book and telling a bit about his story and the relationship that he's had with me. And I had him on stage there in Toronto, and it was really, really a very, very beautiful moment. And he's just been flying. He's been in the clouds. He can't even believe he said, people were coming up to me, and they just wanted me to hug them. They told me that I was inspiration. He said, I can't even believe that. I mean, his whole life changed, and it's like so many of the things that come into our life that we think are terrible, and what an awful thing to have Parkinson's disease at the age of 68. It was largely from him being in Vietnam and being exposed to Agent Orange. And it turns out that this storm, this horrible thing that supposedly happened to him in his life, was one of the greatest gifts that he was ever given. He found God. He found a way to get over his addictions. He started writing, and he's the happiest guy in the world these days. So, and I had him up there on stage. So
that's great.
Book is wonderful. Yeah.
And he's a sweetheart.
He is. He's a sweet man. Yeah.
And Catherine, what was your question?
Yeah, you mentioned during your talk that, we must be what we can be. And you said obese people are not what they can be, that they don't treat their body with reverence. And then, of course, Sky went on to talk about the greatest gift is to love yourself. And
right.
I'm a weight loss coach, and what I do is not about nutrition or fitness. It's about teaching conscious weight loss, which is like the intellectual, the emotional, the spiritual clarity that we bring to these things. And it's grounded in unconditional love. So my question for you, the cleansing and the weight loss that you experienced recently, you talked about a greater clarity that brought to you, and I'm assuming that that's serving your writing now in a big way. How would you articulate this greater clarity for others who just don't know what they're missing? And then the second part of my question is, what's your thought on spiritual leaders who are overweight or obese?
Well, there's such a conflict in this because, and out of one side of my mouth, I say that you are not your body. And so therefore what you are is formless. I tell people often, the life inside of you is really God. That your body is, if you weigh your body when you're alive and then instantly you die and life leaves your body and you weigh it, it weighs the same. So that your life, that whatever it is that leaves it, is weightless. It's formless. But we all emerge, on the other side of my mouth, I say that our bodies are our temples. These are the things that house our soul. And if these bodies are being deteriorated or they're being poisoned or they're being overfed or they're being misused in some way, not exercised properly, not fed properly, then you don't have any place else to live. God leaves this physical domain, if you will, and you are incarnated here into a physical body so that when you return to optimum health, when you return to perfect health, the place from which you originated. I mean, yesterday I was out walking and I saw two people walking towards me, and they both were about maybe 125 pounds overweight at least. Rolls of fat rolling off of them, hard to walk, could see over breath. Their faces were flushed, red, and so on. And both of them were carrying from Subway a soft drink that must have had 32 ounces in it. It must have been a quart of either Coca-Cola or some kind of sugary drink. And I was just watching and watching them as they were walking, barely, having difficulty walking, but balancing this bag of food with this great big thing of pure sugar that they were pouring into their bodies. And I was thinking, if you only knew, if you could only sense inside of you that there is a place that is craving for you to just drink pure water, for you to rid yourself of this mental training that you have had, that you have to pour this kind of stuff into your body. Because we all come from a place of well-being. We come from a place of perfect health. And when you get back to that place of well-being, when you return, as I've quoted T.S. Eliot many times on the show, and said, we shall not cease from exploration. But at the end of all of our exploring will be to return to the place from which we originated and to know it for the first time, to know it. I think he might have been talking about death there, that when we die, we'll return to the place. But I've said in Wishes Fulfilled that I believe that we can experience returning to that place without having to leave our bodies. And when you do return to it, when you begin to exercise yourself regularly, when you begin to watch the kind of food that you place into your body, when you begin to drink more water, when you begin to have healthier thoughts, there's a new clarity because you're now reconnected to your source. You're more aligned with God than you've ever been before. And this is the clarity that I feel. You're absolutely right. I feel it when I'm writing. I feel it in every moment of my life. We got to go, Catherine. We're going to get a break here. I just heard. I want to send you a copy of Experiencing the Miraculous. Have you looked at that?
No, I would love to receive it. Thank you.
Yeah, it's from Assisi and Lourdes and Medjugorje, and I hope I answered your question, and I'm not sure if I did, but it's really just about connecting back to Source and feeling God in everything you do, and that's perfect health. There's no obesity there.
And we'll go right back to calls. We've got some great people lined up here, so let's go to Cheyenne, Wyoming. There's an interesting place on line 10, and let's check in with Roy.
Hello, Dr. Dyer. It's Roy Rogers again.
Hi, Roy. How are you? How's Trigger?
Doing okay. Trying to stay out of the rain and everything. We're getting a little bit of rain right now. We need it over here in this part of the country. You heard about all the wildfires to the south of us.
I have.
All in Colorado, which have been very devastating.
A lot of prayers going out there. Have a dear friend. In fact, our friend Nancy Levin, who works, of course, for Hay House and has written her own little book of poetry, is in Boulder, and I was speaking to her, and she was standing outside of her apartment, and she could actually feel the heat of the flames. And I told her just sort of facetiously that I would put an end to that, and that night they got about 30% rain that night, so I took total credit for that. I don't take credit for the fires, but I take credit for the rain.
Anyway, I heard another caller tell you one time that you'd actually helped bring rain or something to him when it was last year, I think, when I first started listening to your show. I think it was one of the first shows I heard. So
yeah.
Maybe your biography ought to be called The Rainmaker or something like that.
That's interesting, because when I was in Bali, I think I've told this story on here, but we were way out in a remote part of the island years ago with my wife and two of my children when they were just little. And we walked into this village, and there was a man laying there on the ground looking up at the sky. And this is right on the equator, practically. And I asked, who is he? What does he do? And they said, he's the rainmaker. He brings rain. And he doesn't pray for rain. He prays rain. Greg Braden wrote about that in one of his books. So, yeah. Anyway, what's on your mind, my friend from Cheyenne?
I told the call screener I wanted to ask a question about how it might feel sometimes when you feel maybe when it comes to being inspired and maybe feeling at a point where you're broken. But you kind of answered that question when you were talking to another person. You kind of just gave me just what you said in your last call about just, what you were saying. And so I think I'd like to change it if I might. And it's something else that's kind of bothering me, because it's something that you talk about a lot. And I watch your PBS special. Whenever it's on PBS, it's on a lot. And if I happen to be catching it, I'll just listen to the audio just to bring in the positive vibes. But if, you're talking about Anita Moorjani and death, and you've written about this and how, when people die, it seems like they go to this feeling of absolute love and peace and everything like that. Okay, I guess my question might be, I guess it might just be more of a philosophical one, because I kind of think about this too. I know, because if people talk about how great it feels to be dead, because I've never had any experience like that, if it's so great to be on that other side, why then are we here? Is it a curse then that we're here? Because, we have all these problems we have to deal with. And wouldn't it just be easier if we just could all just be in peaceful and all feeling light and feeling good all the time without having to have this human experience? We could all just be in the netherworld feeling peaceful, and there would be no problems at all. And sometimes I kind of wish that too, because it's like, it'd just be easier that way.
Yeah. Well, Roy, I'll tell you, you asked the question that from philosophers from Socrates and Plato to Descartes and Jesus and Buddha and everyone else has been addressing, like, what are we doing here? What is our purpose? And why even show up in the first place? One of Anita's, Anita Moorjani, who's the author of Dying to Be Me, had a near-death experience. And I wrote the foreword to that book, and it's truly one of the most remarkable books that I've ever read in my life. I recommend it to everyone, and I pass it out to a lot of people. I bought several hundred copies myself, and I pass it out to anybody who's dealing with this whole issue of cancer and death and near death and so on. And it's I think it's going to be destined to be a classic. But she is being interviewed in London. And she's asked the question, why were you the lucky one? Why were you the one that, because no one who's ever been at that end stage of cancer that she experienced for over 5 years and was just that close to death has ever come back, let alone come back and be cancer-free and out there walking around talking about it. And she said, I didn't want to go back into my body. And my sister-in-law, Marilyn, had this experience back in 1971 when she was in a head-on collision, and her body was all broken up, and her face was all torn apart. All the bones in her face were broken. She had internal bleeding, and she was on life support for 17 days in ICU and so on. And she said she didn't want to get back into her body as well. She said she was in such a place of that you just described, Roy, of just divine bliss and peacefulness and so on. And why would anyone want to get back into their bodies? And Anita's response was, I always loved it when she said, because people ask her, look, my sister had the same thing you had, or my mother had this, or my wife had that, and they died. Why were you the lucky one? And she said, maybe they were the lucky ones, and I wasn't the lucky one. Maybe I had a dharma. I had something to come in here into this world and to accomplish. And then when I accomplished it, I can't do it as long as I'm not, it's not back in this body. And she felt, my sister-in-law had 3 children that she felt that she had to get back into her body to take care of. Anita felt that she had a very important message. She wanted to talk to people about being love, to being in a state of love. But to the question that you are asking, which is why are we here in the first place, it's just the great mystery, Roy. I mean, it's and just you have to just live in that mystery. I have no idea. I mean, I've read many books about this, and and many of the spiritual masters, especially when they speak about, why did God even create this world? And why not just stay in a place of a non-form bliss? Period. Some of them say that God just got bored, with all of that, and just wanted to create an opportunity to express it in a physical form as well as in a spiritual form. I don't know the answer to that. I can't even pretend to know the answer to it, but I do know that we're here. We did incarnate. This is the physical body. These things that I'm looking at trees and the ocean and the grass and the birds and the flowers, in the room that I'm sitting in and so on. And it's real, and yet there's the paradox that it's that it's not real at all, that it's all illusion, that we're all spirit. So if we're going to be here for 100 years or so, the whole thing is just be in a state of grace and peace and love and do the best you can with it. I don't try to make any more out of it than that. What do you think?
As I've gotten older, well, since I've been 39, I've just been feeling, I guess, a little bit older. It's kind of like, anytime I feel a little bit, I get a little ache or pain, or I'm thinking, oh, God, is this the start of something, or like, it's like that one movie, Solitary Man, where they were middle-aged people in their 40s or 50s or something, and they were saying, the best news you can get from a doctor is like, we caught it early. And yesterday I was buying something at the store, and this lady asked me if I wanted my senior citizen discount, and I'm only 45. And I'm like, I guess maybe I thought a little bit more about death, because it's not like I haven't seen it instantly to where like a near-death experience and stuff, and it's like I'm thinking, man, it just seems like it's just a slow, gradual, kind of torturous thing to this point, and I guess that's why it's been kind of bugging me also a little bit.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. The best thing to do with that, Roy, is just turn it around and just say to yourself, God is love, and we come from God. God is the source of all things, so that we are love. And so you just love every aspect. It's like I was telling the story of my brother David, standing up there in front of several thousand people in Toronto, and being able to speak when he couldn't before, and being able to say, I love my Parkinson's disease. I've been diagnosed with leukemia. I love this leukemia. It has done so many wonderful things for me, and it has given me an opportunity to serve so many other people who are so terrified and so frightened and scared and thinking about dying. It has brought me Anita Moorjani. It brought her into my life, and this person who has now written a book that I think can bring peace and love to a lot of people. And just let the rest of it take care of itself, because when it's time for life to leave your body, it will, and it can't. The part of you that is really real, that is authentic, was never born. It never dies. It's infinite. So see yourself as an infinite being. And just see, this is just part of the dance. That's all.
Well,
Gotta go, my friend.
Yeah,
thanks, Roy. God bless you. Yeah, you're very welcome. Let's send you a copy of Experiencing the Miraculous. Leave your address there. It's the wonderful tour that we did to Assisi, Lourdes, and Medjugorje. It's a really beautiful program.
Okay, I'll check with you later in the year.
Thanks, Roy. Say hi to Trigger and Kimosabi.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
That would be funny.
Kimosabi, Nancy? I mean, Nancy. Diane. I'm just talking about Nancy. Do you know?
Kimosabi, was that the Lone Ranger? No, that was Tonto.
That's what Tonto always said, Kimosabe.
Oh, right. That's my friend,
Yeah,
right? Something like that.
You're not old enough to remember the Lone Ranger.
I remember who he is, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. Where should we go next? How about let's go to Gina in Dalton, Georgia on line 1. And Gina,
Hello.
thanks for holding. You're on with Dr. Dyer.
Hello.
Hi, Gina.
Hi, Dr. Dyer. It's such an honor to speak with you. Thank you so much for taking my call.
Oh, you're very welcome. Nice to hear from you, dear.
I'll have to give you just a little bit of backstory to understand my question more. About 3 years ago, I started going through a bit of a, awakening, or I started to go through an awakening. I've had many life-altering experiences from childhood on up into my 30s. I'm 39 now. And I started to assimilate all those problems that I have, and I don't have the victim mentality as much anymore. And I've been able to make use of, find the good in all those situations. And over the past year, I've been feeling really led to be of service to others because, for many years, friends and close family have been coming to me kind of with their problems anyway. And for the longest time, I had the kind of thought, I have all these problems. Why is that to me? But I guess because it didn't completely take me down, I still had a lot of the victim feelings, And anyway, but to get quicker to my question, my husband and I, we've been together for almost 10 years. And he, has had a lot of situations in his past, too, that has created kind of, the victimization in him, too. So we, in the beginning, we identified with each other on that level. Well, I'm not so much identifying with him in that way anymore. Mm-hmm. And, it's kind of put a lot of space between us since I've been going through all these changes. Mm-hmm. So, I'm kind of wondering what might happen with us in the future. I'm just, we've just been growing further and further apart. And I don't see where I'm wanting my life to go to be any different. And I'm not sure, he's ready for me to keep having that change, if that makes any sense. I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous.
No, that's okay, Gina. Now, let me ask you this question. Are you in love with your husband?
I am. I do. I love him very much. Mm-hmm. I love him very much.
And what does that mean to you? What does it mean to love someone very much, to be in love with someone?
I want the best for him. Mm-hmm. I want him to be happy. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. That's okay.
But I want to be happy, too.
Right. Does your happiness come from being able to do what you just said, to be able to love him and have him fulfill his own destiny and be all that he can be?
Yes.
Because, love doesn't have to mean that that you see eye to eye on everything and that you're in agreement. I've often said that our soulmates are often the people who push our buttons and teach us how to be compassionate, how to love the things that don't match up to what we would like them to be.
Yes, and I understand that, and I can see how challenging me for all these years has been, a great help to the changes that I've went through. And now, I would really like to be able to help him, with some of his things, but, he's not really interested in what I had to say. So, it's hard to see him struggle with those things, knowing that he doesn't have to.
Yeah, but you know what? It's like all of this sort of happens, Gina. It happens on sort of divine time. I mean, we try to push the river. We try to make. You're moving in a direction. You're probably moving a little bit faster than he is. You're seeing things that he doesn't see. He's probably got different things on his mind altogether. And instead of just allowing that and just staying in a place of this is who he is, this is how he feels, this is what he does. It's not the same as I am. I'm going off in this direction. And allow yourself to go in different directions and still maintain the love. And ultimately, the decision about whether you're going to stay together or not, or whether this will end in a happier marriage, or whether it'll end in a divorce or whatever, that's just the tricks that the mind starts playing on. It's like, I've got to get this all figured out. I have to have my whole life scheduled, and I have to know every detail of what's going to happen. Instead of that, I would just recommend that you just be in a state of grace and joy. And if he's not in the same place that you are at, honor him for where he is, and don't be in that place where, there's something wrong here. We constantly tend to do this in our relationships. We're trying to find a common ground, and this is, that we both agree on everything. The fact is that you probably agree on very little. And love, and love is really just, a willingness to love, love someone regardless of what they think. Robert Frost said it so beautifully. We love the things we love for what they are.
Well, we have two children, too. I have an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old autistic son. And the past 5 years, I used to have a career. And after the economy first officially fell out, I lost my job. And so I became a homemaker because I had a young baby at that point in time. And we started having problems with him early on, and later to find out that he's autistic. Mm-hmm. So I've tried to make the best use of my time being here and not having, the career and everything. So I've tried to appreciate it and make the best use I've had of it. And, that's when I began all this.
Yeah.
It's been a wonderful journey.
And, you've got a lot on your plate. I mean, you've got a special needs son who requires a lot of your attention. He probably, ultimately, if you could see him, as probably the greatest teacher who ever came into your life.
Absolutely.
And he teaches you about being in the moment and being, being in a state of grace. And he's a representation of divine love.
Absolutely.
And so it's like, instead of looking at him as someone who is taking up so much of your time and keeping from being able to work the way you used to and so on, see him as this great gift that came into your life. And it's like, if you look at him that, and then you look at your husband and you say, well, no, I could look at him as someone who's not on the same path I'm on, and he's going in one direction, and this is going to lead to terrible things. Or you can just say, I just love him for what he is. And I don't have to be with him at every moment, and we don't have to agree on everything or even anything. And I can still be in a state of love, because divine love is really a different kind of love. It's a love that, that never changes, and it's a love that never varies, and it's a love that you have for everything and everyone. And the life inside of you, the life inside of your husband, the life inside of your son and your daughter, is really just God. That's all it is. And if you can just stay in that state, just stay in that very peaceful, loving state, and turn the rest of your life and all of the details over to God, over to something greater than yourself, and just be, just be in a state of peace and joy. It's you'd be surprised how quickly it'll all work out for you.
Yes, well, with my son, when we first started having problems with him, and, I found out the whole autistic thing, I struggled with it for a very long time. Of course, didn't want to accept it and all that kind of thing. But then, I started seeing, how much he's taught me and how wonderful he is, just like you.
Absolutely, yeah. Also, become conscious of what you feed him. Read Pam McDonald's diet, book, The Perfect Gene Diet.
We've already cut back on a lot of different things because of
that's very important, because we're finding out that a lot of the stuff that we're eating. I mean, if you go out into the world and look, you see that 1 out of 3 of us now are chronically obese. And then you see high increases in the number of autistic children, and you're seeing lots of changes, physical changes taking place in our human species, and a lot of it has to do with watching, the kinds of foods that we place in, the water that we drink, and things like that.
Yes, we've been working on a lot of that.
Yeah, he's a blessing.
I've been trying to work on my own self too, with my, with my weight and stuff. I've always kind of had a weight issue, but in the past 3 years, I've been able to take off 70 pounds, but it's took me 3 years to take it off.
70 pounds? That's a whole Backstreet Boy. That's what Well, good for you, my dear. I don't know if you know anything about it. You've heard me talk in the last few weeks on the Master Cleanse.
Yes, I have.
Going through and cleansing your body, getting it back into maximum health. That's what I'm working at right now. I just found out that I called my son, who's 25 years old, and he's a surfer, and he's in great shape, and he's, all these things, and I asked him what he weighs, and it turns out that I've got my weight down to, it's exactly the same as his. at the
wow.
age of 25. So,
Awesome.
yeah,
That's
and any of it, because it all, and when I think about your call and your husband and your son and you and the obesity thing and all of that, just come from a place of I am divine love, I am perfect health, I'm a piece of God, and my body I treat it as a temple, my son's body is a temple, my husband's body is a temple, and all I'm going to do is just be in a state of love, and just try that, try it. It works.
I will.
Let me send you. We got to go. I got to get to another call. I want to send you a copy of Experiencing the Miraculous. It's four films in Assisi and Lourdes and Medjugorje. You're going to love this. I promise you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dyer. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you, sweetheart. God bless you. It's all perfect, dear. It's all perfect.
Thank you.
Namaste.
And we probably have time for one more. We can grab Ellen in New York, and she's been very patient on line 5. We've got about 2 minutes.
Oh,
so
my
we
goodness.
can grab Ellen really quick.
Ellen.
Thanks for your
Dr.
patience.
Dyer.
Hi.
So quickly,
Hi.
I just wanted to ask you then about the forgiveness the forgiveness work and what you did with your father. And I'm completing my training to be a body-centered psychotherapist, so we work with the body. And so what sometimes I've done all the spiritual work, and family can still trigger you, and I find myself acting in ways that surprise me. And forgiveness, especially, it can really be held in the body. You can feel these emotions, and I think I just wanted to hear from you about that work. Sometimes it sounds like you just did it effortlessly with your father, and if you could just speak a little bit about that, like bringing forgiveness into the body, because it's so important.
Right. I didn't do it effortlessly, but you know what, Ellen? The truth of it is, I don't really believe I did it at all. I'm writing about this right now in this book that's going to be out probably another year or two. It's called I Can See Clearly Now, as I'm going back, looking at all of the things that transpired in my life from the time that I was a young boy living in foster homes up until right now, and all the different people and the teachings that have come into my life. And I really think that I was just being guided. And I think we're all being guided. We just don't listen to that guidance. The old line that's like, when the student is ready, the teachers will appear. The teachers are always there. The teaching is always there. It's whether or not we take a hold of it and grab it and use it. And I really think that I was directed to my father's grave in 1974 because I had a dharma. I had something that I came here to do. But I was aware that I had to do this. This wasn't even a choice for me, that I was going to become a teacher of higher consciousness. And so I was directed to do that. Get quiet, listen, be in peace, and you'll be guided to forgive and to love. Gotta go. I'm sorry. Call back next week. I'd love to talk to you more. See if we can get around next week.
Because I believe so strongly in the message of public television. I believe so strongly in the idea that we have a spiritual deficit in this country, and that we don't have an information deficit. There's plenty of that. But there's a deficit of spirit, a deficit that says there's not enough of us that feel connected to the highest and the greatest part of ourselves. And these top 10 principles that I have put together here for this program, you might want to jot down. You might want to go into your desk and just take out a little piece of paper. But I think if you practice them and look at them and see them, they come from someone who's had a burning desire, but has also been living a life in which I have felt independent of the opinions of others in terms of whether or not I should or shouldn't be doing that. There's something that I allow to consult myself, within myself, rather than looking outside to see if this is right or not. And so let me just I'll number them and I'll go through them, and I'll give you some examples of them, and you decide whether they're to your liking or whether they work or not. The first of these principles came from a Vedantic scholar in the 10th century. His name was Tilopa. It's not exactly bestseller books, but it's the kind of thing that really excites me, because I think of going back 1,000 years or 2,000 years and reading what some of the greatest minds had to say and how open they were to the potentiality that each and every one of us have for greatness. And this first principle says, as Tilopa put it, have a mind that is open to everything and attached to nothing. One of the central principles of my life is that no one knows enough to be a pessimist about anything. And that each and every one of us, when we close our mind to what is possible for us or what is possible for humanity, closes off the genius that resides and lives in each and every one of us. Having an open mind doesn't necessarily mean finding fault with all of the things that you've been taught by others. It means opening yourself up to the potentiality and the possibility that anything and everything is possible. So having a mind that is open to everything and attached to nothing really means finding within ourselves the ability to get rid of a trait that I find so common in the contemporary world. Do you know that most people that I meet spend their lives looking for occasions to be offended? They actually are out there hoping that they can find some reason to be offended. And there's no shortage of reasons. They're out there everywhere. The way this person dressed, what this person said, they turn on their TV, they hear the news, they're offended by this, someone used language that they didn't like, someone doesn't share the same customs that you, and people all day long. In fact, if you keep track tomorrow, you will find probably 100 reasons that you can go around being offended. But a mind that is open to everything and attached to nothing is a mind that says, I'm never looking for anything to be offended by. And that whatever anybody else out there has to say, my response to that is, that's an interesting point of view. I've never considered that before. I remember being interviewed for a morning television show, and the woman that was interviewing me said, how does it feel to be talking to audiences where people have all of these strange beliefs, these weird things that they come to? And it intrigues me because one of the things that Emerson said is in one of his very first essays. He says the first thing we have to say respecting what are called new views here in New England, where we are right now, is that they are not new, but the very oldest of thoughts cast into the mold of these new times. And that was in 1842. He was speaking about that. And this woman asked me the question. She said, doesn't it offend you that there's people out there and they're talking about people using crystals to heal somebody? And I remember my response. My response was that if I've got hemorrhoids and somebody out there is convincing me that crystals are going to heal them, I'm ordering crystal chairs. Why not? I mean, all you have to do is understand something called a placebo. And what is a placebo? It's nothing more than a convincing belief. If I hand you this pill and say this pill is going to cure your arthritis, and you take it and the pill is just a sugar pill, but your arthritis disappears, I'm into buying those placebos. Where can I get some of those placebos? And it's true of everything. And it's when you think about all the things that we enjoy and what our life is like, it took people who had a mind that wasn't closed to allow us to make the progress that we've made. Progress is impossible if you always do things the way you've always done things. But the other word in this, what Talopa said, is be attached nowhere. Be attached nowhere. Attachment really means I am deluding myself into a belief that if I can't have or if I can't do this or that thing, then somehow I am going to become immobilized. So an open mind that is detached. In my most recent book, in A Spiritual Solution to Every Problem, I have an observation. And it's an observation from Anthony DeMello, a man I respect enormously, a priest, who, in The Way to Love, puts it this way. Here's a great test for your relationships, especially the relationships that you're in with those whom you love, not your children, but your spouses and your lovers and so on. Try this test on for size. 1, I am not really attached to you at all. I am merely deluding myself into the belief that without you, I will not be happy. And 2, and here's the toughest test for non-attachment, I leave you free to be yourself, to think your thoughts, indulge your tastes, follow your inclinations, behave in ways that you decide are to your liking. How's that for a challenge? And so what most of us do in our relationships, and why they are not as successful as we would like them to be, is that we become attached, and we tell ourselves that if this person behaves in a way that I find offensive, then I can't be happy. I make my happiness, my fulfillment dependent upon those people that I love being what I think that they should be. And detachment doesn't mean being a victim. It just simply means I know that I can make my life fulfilled and happy by having a mind that is open to everything and attached nowhere. The second principle is a very simple principle. It says you can't give away what you don't have. Now, it sounds ridiculous, okay? But it's more than what meets the ear as you hear this. You can't give away what you don't have. People who are not good at giving away love can't give away love because they don't have it to give away. If I want to give you a dozen oranges, I can't give you those dozen oranges unless I go out and pick up 12 oranges someplace. Otherwise, all it is just empty rhetoric. And the same thing is true of virtually everything in your life. You can't give away love for others if you don't have love in here to give away. If what you have in here is contempt, if what you have in here is anger, if what you have in here is fear, then these are the things you're going to be giving away in your life. And I've often thought, and I really believe very strongly that there's a law, sort of a law in the universe. I call it the law of attraction. And the law of attraction is one that works like this. You get back from the universe, from the world, what it is that you put out there in the world. And if you're putting out there into the world that I am not worthy of attracting something beautiful into my life, that the universe will respond back to you with exactly that message. And there are people who come to me and who came to me for years when I had my own counseling practice and so on, and they would say to me, I just keep attracting the same kind of people, the same kind of events, the same kind of losers into my life. Why is that? Why do I keep doing that? And I keep attracting an absence of abundance. I just can't seem to attract abundance into my life. I'm always behind the 8 ball. I'm never getting ahead. And I suggested to them, I said, did it ever occur to you that that's the very kind of message you're sending out to the world and out to the universe? That the ocean of abundance is there. And you can go to that ocean of abundance and you can take a Mack truck and you can fill it up 20 times a day and take it out of there, and guess what? It doesn't impact at all the ocean of abundance. It doesn't even go down a zillionth of an inch. It's unlimited. Or you can go to the same ocean of abundance with a eyedropper, and you can just take this much out once a month and say, that's all that seems to be available for me. And the interesting thing for me is that when people go to this ocean of abundance, this unlimited world, all that I have is thine, it says in the holy books. All that I have is thine. It's all there for you. But if you believe inside that it's limited, that you can only get so much, that other people are going to get it before you do, then you'll find yourself creating that very same thing. And the even more interesting part about this, you can't give away what you don't have principle, is that if your message to the universe is gimme, 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 which is a lot of people's message to the universe. I want this from you, I want that from you, please give me this, I have to have that. That's what their prayer is like, that's what their message is, and they say, I want this from the universe, gimme, gimme, gimme. The universe's response back to that kind of a mentality is exactly the same. The universe will say right back to you over and over again, gimme, gimme, gimme. And you'll find yourself never, ever arriving, but always being in a state of striving, always feeling as if you're being neglected, never feeling as if you have enough, always feeling as if you're being shortchanged, because you're constantly under the pressure to give, to get back what the universe is demanding from you. And the interesting thing about all of this, the irony of this, is that if you shift that and you say to the universe, to the world, how may I serve? How may I serve? The universe's response back to you is, how may I serve you? How may I serve you? And it's very intriguing. When you take your energy and your attention off of what you are demanding from the world, and instead saying, what can I give to the world? And it's really the basis behind that very famous line of the President John Kennedy's inaugural address. Ask not what your country can do, ask what you can do for your country. And the irony of that is, and I've learned that in my own life, that when I stopped thinking about what was in it for Wayne Dyer and how much could I get, and I began to shift and say, how can I help you? How can I give to you? What can I do for you? And people who write to me, I send them something. When I encounter somebody that needs help of some kind, I'm very often just giving that to them. And then I find that it just keeps coming back into my life. And once I shifted that energy off of what can I have into what can I give, it seemed to me that the universe responded back with the very same message. What can I give to you? And the most incredible and wonderful and beautiful abundance has flowed into my life in every way that I can possibly think of. You can't give away what you don't have. So take a look at an inventory of what you do have. How much do you love yourself? How much kindness do you have in you? How much peace do you have in you? How much joy do you have in you? And if you're able to give that away as many times as you can in a given day, watch and see how much more of that continues to show up and come back in your life. Okay? The third principle is one of my very favorites. It's called, there are no justified resentments. And this is a very difficult principle for many people to get, but one that I believe very strongly in. I was in a group one time of drug addicts and alcoholics. And I was one of the people that was a sponsor and leading this group. And the sign on the wall said, there are no justified resentments in this group. And what I said to that group that night was, no matter what anybody says to you here, no matter what kind of anger comes directed towards you, no matter how much hate you may encounter showing up in your life, there are no justified resentments. Meaning that if you carry around resentment inside of you about anything or about anyone, and I'm talking about the person that you lent money to and hasn't paid you back, I'm talking about the person in your life that you feel was abusive in your life, I'm talking about the person who walked out on you and left you for somebody else, I'm talking about all of the things that you have justified in your heart and in your life that you have the right to be resentful about. And I'm suggesting to you that those resentments will always end up harming you and creating in you a sense of despair. I've often said that no one ever dies from a snake bite. The snake bite will never kill you. You cannot be unbitten. Once you're bitten, you're bitten. But it's the venom that continues to pour through your system after the bite that will end up destroying you. So now you have to take a look at all of the resentments that you may have in your life. And I'd like to suggest to you that I think there is a wonderful metaphor for this that I have created in my life for how to make this work. And I think that Regis Philbin is the one who's responsible for it, all right? My buddy Regis. There's a show called Who Wants to Be a Millionaire that has been popular all over the world. I'm in South Africa, it comes on, all right? I was in Australia, and they've got their own Australian version. And in Greece, they have the Greek edition of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. And basically, this show has two levels that you have to get to. Now, the first level is the $1,000 level. And at the $1,000 level, you basically have to answer a question like, on your hand, you have some digits. Those digits on your hand are called your feet, your nose, your ears, your fingers. And everybody who ever goes on the show has this horrible dread that they're going to go out on one of those questions, right? So basically, in order to get to the $1,000 level, all you have to do is answer 5 pretty simple questions in order to get to the $1,000 level. Now, on this program, the $1,000 level for you in this metaphor means that you will leave with something if you get this. At least get this. This is the $1,000 level. You must send blame out of your life for any conditions of your life. Blame has to go. All right? Now, blame means if you're sitting there with a disease, you say without guilt, it's mine, I take responsibility for it. This means that if you have been through any tough circumstances in your life, this means if you have a minimal amount of financial security in your life, this means if your children don't get along with you, this means that if your neighbors are taking up a petition to get you out of the neighborhood, whatever it might be that's going on in your life, you name it, and everybody across this great country and across this world has a series of these things that you're willing to say, I am here because of the choices that I have made right now. I'm willing to say that. Even though it's difficult, and we know it's really not your fault. We know really there's a lot of people out there who are really bad, all right? But you're willing to say no blame. That's the first level, all right? That's where you understand no justified resentment. And then on the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire show, there is what is called the $32,000 level. And the $32,000 level is not only an opportunity for you to walk away with a sizable amount of goodies, which you can walk away from tonight in this program, but it also is the door opener to multi-wealth. But you got to get to this in order to have an opportunity to move into these transcendent levels, all right? Millionaire spiritual status, all right? You got to get through these next 5 questions. And this $32,000 question, or level rather, comes to this. It came to me from a quotation that I used in the writing of A Spiritual Solution to Every Problem. I read a book that was written a couple of thousand years ago by Patanjali, the Yoga Sutras, the aphorisms of Patanjali. And one of those sutras, one of those aphorisms, observations that this brilliant man made almost 2,000 years ago, was this. He said, if you become steadfast in your abstentions of thoughts of harm directed towards others, all living creatures will cease to feel enmity in your presence. Now this translates to blame, pretty basic, no more blame. I'm just not going to assign responsibility to other people for where I am, because now I have an opportunity to get rid of it. If I think someone else caused it, then I've got to wait for somebody else to change in order for me to get rid of it, and you might wait forever for that. But if I take responsibility for it, I can do something, including move on, which might be the most important thing to do. All right? But at the higher level, when there are no justified resentments, what you are doing is what St. Francis did, Francesco. What you are doing is you are at a place where you are sending love in response to hate. You are literally saying, no matter what comes my way, I am going to be steadfast in my abstention of thoughts of harm directed toward others. I'm going to work hard at, no matter what comes my way, having it come out of me what I want to come out of me, and that is love, and that is a higher energy. And if you can get to that level, Patanjali said, all living creatures will cease to feel enmity in your presence. I have a little girl, a precious little girl. I have 6 precious girls and 2 precious sons, but I have a little girl who is almost 12. And she loves animals like no one I've ever met in my life. I mean, her whole life revolves around animals. And when we walk in the woods, butterflies avoid me, fly away from people around, and they come and they land right on her arm, and it happens all the time. All living creatures, she couldn't have a thought of harm directed towards any living creature. And Patanjali said to us, all living creatures will cease to feel fear or enmity or anger in the presence of those who can send love in response to hate. That's what I mean when I say there are no justified resentments. What I'd like to do, I'd like to share a little story here with you. It's a very tender story. It was sent to me by someone who sends me beautiful things in the mail. And I call it the Teddy story. And I'd like to read this to you, if I can do it without tearing up. And this story illustrates this as well as anything I've ever seen. There's a story many years ago of an elementary school teacher. Her name was Mrs. Thompson. As she stood in front of her 5th grade class on the very first day of school, she told the children a lie. Like most teachers, she looked at her students and said that she loved them all the same. But that was impossible, because there in the front row, slumped in his seat, was a little boy named Teddy Stoddard. Mrs. Thompson had watched Teddy the year before and noticed that he didn't play well with the other children, that his clothes were messy, and that he constantly needed a bath. Teddy could be unpleasant. It got to the point where Mrs. Thompson would actually take delight in marking his papers with a broad red pen and making bold X's and then putting a big F at the top of his papers. At the school where Mrs. Thompson taught, she was required to review each child's past records, and she put Teddy's off until last. However, when she reviewed his file, she was in for a surprise. Teddy's 1st grade teacher wrote, "Teddy is a bright child with a ready laugh. He does his work neatly and he has good manners. He's a joy to be around." His 2nd grade teacher wrote, "Teddy's an excellent student, well liked by his classmates, but he's troubled because his mother has a terminal illness and life at home must be a struggle." His 3rd grade teacher wrote, "His mother's death has been hard on him. He tries to do his best, but his father doesn't show much interest, and his home life will soon affect him if steps aren't taken." Teddy's 4th grade teacher wrote, "Teddy's withdrawn and doesn't show up much interest in school. He doesn't have many friends, and sometimes he even sleeps in class." By now, Mrs. Thompson realized the problem, and she was ashamed of herself. She felt even worse when her students brought her Christmas presents wrapped in beautiful ribbons and bright paper, except for Teddy's. His present was clumsily wrapped in heavy brown paper that he got from the grocery bag. Mrs. Thompson took pains to open it in the middle of the other presents. Some of the children started to laugh when she found a rhinestone bracelet with some of the stones missing and a bottle that was 1/4 full of perfume. But she stifled her children's laughter when she exclaimed how pretty the bracelet was, putting it on and dabbing some of the perfume on her wrist. Teddy Stoddard stayed after school that day just long enough to say, "Mrs. Thompson, today you smell just like my mom used to." After the children left, she cried for at least an hour. On the very day, she quit teaching reading, writing, and arithmetic, and instead, she began to teach children. Mrs. Thompson paid particular attention to Teddy. As she worked with him and his mind seemed to come alive, the more she encouraged him, the faster he responded. By the end of the year, Teddy had become one of the smartest children in the class, and despite her lie, became one of her teacher's pets. A year later, she found a note under the door from Teddy telling her that she was still the best teacher he ever had in his whole life. 6 years went by before she got another note from Teddy. He then wrote that he had finished high school third in his class, and she was still the best teacher he ever had in his whole life. 4 years after that, she got another letter saying that while things had been tough at times, he stayed in school and stuck with it, and would soon graduate from college with the highest of honors. He assured Mrs. Thompson that she was still the very best and favorite teacher he ever had in his whole life. Then 4 more years passed, and yet another letter came. This time he explained that after he got his bachelor's degree, he decided to go a little further. The letter explained that she was still the best and favorite teacher he ever had, but now his name was a little longer. The letter was signed Theodore F. Stoddard, M.D. But the story doesn't end there. You see, there was yet another letter that spring. Teddy said he'd met this girl and was going to be married. He explained that his father had died a couple of years ago, and he was wondering if Mrs. Thompson might agree to sit in the place at the wedding that was usually reserved for the mother of the groom. Of course, Mrs. Thompson did, and guess what? She wore that bracelet, the one with the several rhinestones missing. And she made sure she was wearing the perfume that Teddy remembered his mother wearing on their last Christmas together. They hugged each other, and Dr. Stoddard whispered in Mrs. Thompson's ear, "Thank you so much for making me feel important and showing me that I could make a difference." Mrs. Thompson came with tears in her eyes and whispered back, "Teddy, you have it all wrong. You were the one who taught me that I could make a difference. I didn't know how to teach until I met you." Isn't that a beautiful story? Yeah. That symbolizes there are no justified resentments. Work at reaching that $32,000 level, the place where the only thing you have to send is love, because that's what's inside. And that's the message of our greatest spiritual teachers. That's all they ever had to give away. The next principle I call "Don't die with your music still in you." And who better to quote than Thoreau right here in Concord when he talked about some of us hear a different drummer, and we must march to the music that we hear. But all of you, everybody watching, everybody here in this beautiful parish, all of you have some music playing. And all of you have a heroic mission. There's no accidents in this universe. We all show up here with a purpose. There's an intelligence that is a part of everything and everyone, and all of us are connected to it. And too many of us are afraid to listen to that music and march to it. You out there, I know you have a book you wanted to write. I know there's a composition you wanted to compose. I know there's a song you want to sing someplace. Maybe you want to raise horses out in Montana. Or maybe you want to open up an ice cream shop on Cape Cod. Who knows what it may be. Maybe you just want to travel and see the world. Maybe you want to go into a relationship with someone but you've been afraid to, but your heart says it's the right thing to do. All of us feel something. And in Leo Tolstoy's famous novel, The Death of Ivan Ilyich, he asks this question that would be terrifying to me. He says, as he has his accountant from Moscow lying on his deathbed, contemplating the horror of this question, what if my whole life has been wrong? I've known what my music is. It's playing right now. As I stand here in front of you with these cameras and in this place, and as I sit down and write my books and tell the world what I know are my truths, I feel always completely on purpose and fulfilled. And no time will I ever come to the end of my life and say, what if my whole life has been wrong? Whoever you are, whatever that music is, however distant it may sound, however strange, however weird others may interpret it to be, don't get to the end of your life and know that you're going to leave and not have it played yet. Don't die with your music still in you. It's the message of the greatest teachers who've ever walked among us. It's the message I give to you today as one of the principles for success and peace in your life. The next principle I call embracing silence. And embracing silence is not that I say this to you because it's so important to be quiet. What I have learned, I have a dear friend, and many of you know, we've put out tapes together, we've appeared on stages all over the world together. He's like a brother to me. His name is Dr. Deepak Chopra, a medical doctor, and a dear and close friend. And whenever anything is going on in my family, if I'm having a problem with one of my children or in my own life, and if I call him up and I'll say, Deepak, or his wife Rita, I'll say, Deepak, what do you think I should do? He always has the same answer, meditate. I'll say, yes, Deepak, I understand meditate, but I said, what do you think? He said, Wayne, go deep inside and meditate. Always meditate. I'll say, will you put Rita on? Wayne, meditate. I say, all right. And you know, I've learned a lot in meditation. But what I know most about getting quiet and getting peaceful is this, that there's only one power in the universe, and it doesn't matter what you call it. You can call it soul, spirit, consciousness, God. You can call it Louise. You can call it anything that you want. But as Alan Watts said, you can't get wet from the word water. It's not what we call something that gives it its substance. And this one power, this one force that flows through everything and allows everything to be, is indivisible. You can't cut it in half. You can't divide it. It's one. It's knowing the one. And everything in your life is almost always given a division. Male, female, young, old, tall, short, black, white, good, bad, up, down. These are all dichotomies. These are all these splits that we all have in our lives. The whole physical world that we live in and are immersed in, it's always immersed in this division. I used to teach a course at St. John's University in New York, and I used to tell my students, when I was trying to teach this principle, anybody who can come to class and bring with them a magnet that only has a North Pole, I'll give you an A in the course. You don't ever have to attend another class. And no matter how thin they would slice that magnet, there was always the South Pole, because the physical world is made up of dichotomies. But we have to learn to fuse the dichotomies. And in fusing the dichotomies and blending the one, that's what silence does for us. That's why embracing silence is so powerful. Because no matter how many times you cut silence in half, it's like zero. You still only get silence. In Zen, they say it's the space between the bars that holds the tiger. And it's the silence between the notes that makes the music. These words that are coming out of my mouth right now come out of the silence. And finding that silence and embracing it means that you go to the place within you that you cannot divide. Just like you can't divide the source, the one, the spirit. You can't divide that either. It's only one. So when you go into your silence and you begin to practice meditation and you begin to make this a part of your life and embrace silence, what you discover is this is where you'll come to know your source. You'll make conscious contact with your source. I can't tell you how many people that have come to me who have suffered from serious illnesses, who've been given diagnoses that it's terminal and that you can't do it, who have gone out to the wilderness and have decided that I am going to commune with nature. And the transcendentalists, Thoreau and Emerson, they believed that nature was our source and that we were all products of nature. And if you can get back to your source, if you can get back to that feeling of being with Spirit, that's where healing can take place. And I've had wonderful stories of people who've told me that it was when I began to embrace that silence that I began to feel more connected to my source. Embrace silence, because it's a way to come to know God, to know your source. Both are indivisible, and the only experience you can have in your daily life that even comes close to a spiritual awakening is silence. The next principle I call giving up your personal history. And I learned it from a man named Carlos Castaneda, who once said that one day, he said, I finally realized that I no longer needed a personal history. And just like drinking, he said, I gave it up. And that, and only that, has made all the difference in the world. You know the nice thing about giving up your personal history is that if you don't have a story, you don't have to live up to it. All of us have these bags of manure that we carry around with us called our past. And the people who have done things to us, and the events and the circumstances, all of this stuff that we use and we bond to. And we bond ourselves to these wounds of our past, and we identify ourselves on the basis of these wounds. And every once in a while we set it down and we reach in there and we smear it all over ourselves. And then we wonder, why does my life smell so bad? I don't understand this. When in fact, the now, this moment, merging yourself into the now, means that you may have been in a relationship. I had a woman from Holland who came over to see me, whose husband had left her after 25 years. She had 4 children, and she just had been on the verge of suicide. And she was losing weight, and she was depressed, and she was taking all kinds of drugs for it, and she was getting sicker and sicker because she just couldn't get over it. And she came to a book signing that I was doing at a bookstore down in Florida. And she said, you've got to say something to me. You've got to say something to me that will help me to get over this. And I told her this line. I said, give up your personal history. Merge yourself here, now, into this moment. And those 25 years are something, if you want to understand how to do it, think of your past as, oh, this hat. And this is your past. Now, you can't just set this thing down over here and walk away from it and give up your personal history, because you'll always have it there to look back at. What you do is you pick up your past and you embrace it. You understand it, you accept it, as I had to go through these things that I had to go through in order for me to get to this place today, and the evidence for that is that I did. You don't need any more evidence. You did. And then you toss it. You toss it. You embrace it, and you toss it. And you merge into the now by giving up your attachment. And some of you have heard me use the metaphor of the wake. Alan Watts talked about the wake is not what drives the boat. The wake is just a trail that is left behind. That's all it is. And so is the wake of your life. And the wake doesn't make the boat go, and neither does the wake of your life the reason why your life is going in the direction that it is. The wake is a trail that is left behind, and it's an illusion to believe that it is the cause of your suffering or your struggles or your difficulty. Give it up. Let it go. Embrace it, understand it, get help doing that if you must, and then move into the now. The next principle I call, it's from a line of Albert Einstein. He said, you can't solve a problem with the same mind that created it. In order to work at solving these things called problems in your life, you have to change your mind. It is your mind where they live, It is your mind that created them. There is where you experience them. They're all illusions. You must change your mind. Literally rewrite your agreement with reality. One of the things I had said earlier is that one of the most difficult things to do in the world is to admit that you were wrong. Admitting that you were wrong is nothing more than saying, I have been making choices with my mind that have created things in my life that are not working. And I no longer intend to continue making those choices. I was wrong. You don't have to make a declaration of it. You don't have to go out and feel guilty about it. You just simply say, it didn't work. The relationship that I was in before, I behaved in these ways. I didn't realize that it wasn't working for me. Now I do, and this is where I choose to be now. The secret of a successful relationship is, to me, understanding that you put your attention and your energy in a person on what you love rather than what you don't love. Robert Frost said it so beautifully. We love the things we love for what they are. For what they are. Not for what they ought to be, not for what they used to be, but for what they are. So when you look into the eyes of a person you're in a relationship with, whether it's your children, you catch them doing things right as much as you possibly can. That's oftentimes takes a lot of hunting, but you'll find it. And when you think that my relationship isn't working, remember, it's in my mind. What am I thinking about that person? And if I could just change my mind and put my thoughts on what I love about this person and keep them there, that makes the relationship flourish. And there are people who go through their entire relationship history with no anger, no hatred, no bitterness, and only love. The next principle is, I call it, treating yourself as if you already were what you would like to become. In other words, you get out in front of your life and you see yourself as having already what you know you'd like to have and deserve to have. My children know how to do this perfectly. I have a daughter who wanted a prom dress, and the prom dress was way outside the budget that I thought a prom dress should be. Well, I thought a prom dress shouldn't cost over $20, so I do have a problem, right? But I upped it to somewhere around $250. I don't know how much, whatever. To me, it was still more than I paid for my first house, okay? But at any rate, she called and said, Dad, this is the only prom dress I could wear. I've got to wear this prom dress. If I don't wear this prom dress, it's just on and on and on with this wonderful. You know, I saw a wonderful book about how to raise teenage daughters. The title of it is Get Out of My Life, but first drive me and Cheryl to the mall, all right? That's the actual title. It's a good book. And so I told Serena, I said, it's just beyond the budget. I've got a certain amount of money that I'm willing to put for it. And she said, but I've already seen myself wearing it. I've already tried it on. I have a picture of myself in the dress in my living room, and I've already showed it to the guy who was taking me to the prom. I mean, it was this whole thing about, and she already saw herself in it. I said, well, if you see yourself in it, then you're going to have to also see yourself as earning the difference between what I'm willing to pay. And she drew up a contract. She went onto the computer, and on the background of the computer, you know, where they have these little background things they put on, there was 500 pictures of the dress, all right? And she signed a contract and said, I'll babysit, I'll do this, I'll do that, and I will pay the difference. And she did, and she wore the dress, because she understood that you treat yourself as if you already are what you'd like to become. There's a genius in you. You have to treat yourself as if you already were that genius. There's something you're completely capable of. See yourself as already there. Then you'll act upon those thoughts, because the ancestor to every action, said Emerson, is a thought. The next principle is called treasuring your divinity. Treasuring your divinity. There's a wonderful observation that I saw from Emerson in Self-Reliance. It's about trusting your divinity, knowing that you are connected to your source, knowing that you are a divine creation and that there are no accidents. He said, a man should learn to detect and watch that gleam of light which flashes across his mind from within, more than the luster of the firmament of bards and sages. Yet he dismisses without notice his own thought because it's his own. In every work of genius, we recognize our own rejected thoughts. They come back to us with a certain alienated majesty. We often reject our thoughts, and we see the things that we think of as grand and as genius, and we reject them because they're our own. Treasuring our divinity instead of being terrified of it. Knowing that I am always connected to my source. There is no way that I cannot, because it is in you, and I am in you, and you are in me, and you can never be separated from it. There is no place that this source is not. It grows everybody's fingernails. It beats everybody's hearts. It digests everybody's foods. It opens all the flowers, and you're always connected to it. And finally, the last principle I call wisdom is avoiding all thoughts which weaken you. You know, every thought has an energy, just like everything else in the universe. And if you have a thought of shame, it will weaken your muscles. And what is your heart but a muscle? If you raise a child to believe in shame and feel ashamed of themselves, every time they think that shameful thought, they will be weakened. And if you have a thought of fear, and if you have a thought of stress, and you have a thought of anguish and anxiety, all of these thoughts and many more are the thoughts that will always weaken you. When you are having a thought that you know is disempowering you, shift it. Shift it to one that is empowering rather than disempowering. And the thoughts that empower are thoughts of neutrality and willingness and love, and ultimately thoughts of divinity. And when you see a troubled person who is out there struggling at the highest level of unity consciousness or God consciousness or spiritual consciousness, you recognize yourself in all that you see. There, but for the grace of God, go I. And I am connected to that person. Changing your thoughts. I appeared on the Tonight Show many years ago, several times, quite a few times. And I remember coming home from the Tonight Show, and I was walking along the beach, and they had taped the show the night before, and I was out for a walk, and a woman who lived in the Northeast stopped me, and she said, "Didn't I see you last night on the, how could you be here?" I said, "Well, I flew the red eye, and I was walking along." And she said, "You know, we're moving down here." She said, "What are the people like here? What's it like?" And I said to her, I said, "Well, what are they like where you live?" She said, "Well," she said, I live in a very big city." And she said, "They're very pushy. And people are not very kind. And they don't have time for you." And she said, "It's really not very pleasant." She said, "That's one of the reasons I'm leaving there." I said, "Well, that's pretty much what you're going to find here." That's basically what the people are like here. On the way back on the same day, someone else who had seen me the night before on the Tonight Show, who had lived in the Midwest, stopped me and asked me almost the same question. She said, "You live here?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Well, my husband and I are moving here and we're looking for a school." She said, "What are the people like here? What's it like here?" I said, "What are they like in Chicago where you live?" She said, "Oh," she said, "it's the Midwest." She said, "People are very friendly, they're open, they open their homes to you, they're very loving, they're very kind." She said, "It's a wonderful place." She said, "I love that, I'm going to really miss that." I said, "That's pretty much what you're going to find here." It's what you expect, it's what you think about that expands. It's what Emerson taught us. The ancestor to every action is a thought. Change your thoughts, and you change your world. Change your expectations, and you change around what you begin to manifest and see showing up in your life. Thank you very much.